You've heard the story of The Exorcist, but what if I told you it's inspired by real events? A young boy, known only as Roland Doe, became the center of one of the most terrifying exorcisms ever recorded. His story was so disturbing, it was kept hidden for decades. In today's video, we're unraveling the truth behind the possession of Roland Doe, the exorcisms that followed, and the chilling events that still haunt those who witnessed it. Roland Doe, born in the 1940s, grew up in a quiet, religious family in suburban Maryland. He was a curious boy, a bit shy, and especially close to his Aunt Harriet. Aunt Harriet was a spiritual person who introduced Roland to a Ouija board, a tool they would use together for harmless fun, sparking Roland's fascination with the unknown. But when Aunt Harriet suddenly passed away, Roland's world took a dark turn. Almost immediately, strange phenomena began to occur in his home. At first, it was the small things, scratching sounds in the walls that seemed to have no source, and odd knocks that echoed throughout the house at night. But soon, Roland's family would be pulled into a nightmare they couldn't explain. This was only the beginning. As days passed, these eerie sounds escalated into something far more terrifying. Furniture would shift across the room as though moved by an unseen force, sometimes lifting right off the ground. Items around the house would be thrown violently, as if hurled by invisible hands. And then came the marks. Roland began to show mysterious scratches on his skin, red lines that seemed to appear out of nowhere, forming words or strange symbols. Frantic and desperate, Roland's family sought help from their minister, but their attempts to stop the disturbances only seemed to make things worse. In Roland's presence, clergymen felt an overwhelming sense of dread. Even the priests were disturbed by his unexplainable outbursts and the way his voice would shift, dropping to an unnatural, guttural tone. The family had to confront the horrifying thought that this wasn't a mere haunting, it was something darker. Their boy was no longer himself. As a last resort, Roland's family moved him to St. Louis to seek help from Jesuit priests who were trained in the ancient rites of exorcism. A team of priests experienced in dealing with the paranormal took on the dangerous responsibility of exorcising the dark force that had taken hold of Roland. Imagine the setting: candlelit rooms, shadows flickering across the walls, and a dreadful silence that hung thick in the air. The priests began the exorcism ritual, reciting prayers in Latin as Roland's behavior grew more disturbing. His strength was beyond anything a young boy should possess, and his voice grew low and guttural, taunting the priests and revealing dark secrets no one else could have known. Night after night, the rituals continued, with the entity within Roland fighting back violently, leaving the priests worn and terrified. It seemed that every time they performed the rites, the force inside Roland grew angrier, more aggressive. The walls echoed with his screams, the air thick with an evil that weighed down on everyone present. Then came the final exorcism. The priests, now exhausted and on edge, performed the last rites with every ounce of their strength. Roland writhed, convulsing, his face twisted in pain as he screamed words that no one understood. The room felt like it was closing in, as if the walls themselves were suffocating everyone inside. And then, in one final, blood-curdling scream, a dark presence seemed to escape from Roland. Silence fell over the room, an eerie calm settling in, as if a violent storm had suddenly passed. The exorcism had taken weeks, but Roland awoke the next day, seemingly free of the force that had plagued him. The darkness had lifted, leaving the priests with both relief and a deep, lingering sense of dread for what they had encountered. In the years that followed, Roland went on to live a quiet, private life. His family guarded the details of his exorcism closely, fearing the judgment and horror it might incite. It wasn't until the 1970s, when The Exorcist brought his story to the screen, that the world would get a glimpse into the horrifying ordeal Roland and his family endured. But the questions remain. Was Roland's case one of mental illness, or was there truly a dark force inhabiting his body? What did those priests confront in the darkness of those candlelit rooms? Was it an entity beyond our understanding, or a manifestation of something deep within Roland's psyche? We may never know for certain. Thank you for watching. If you want more stories that delve into the strange, the dark, and the unexplainable, be sure to subscribe. But remember, some stories are not meant to be told.